The man who stepped out of the Ashwood forest that morning didn't look human anymore. His bare feet sank into the snow, skin pale as paper, eyes hollow but alive. He wore a torn medical mask and a jacket stiff with frost. Deputy Collins' body cam caught everything. The man raised his trembling hand, pointed toward the trees, and whispered, "They're still in there." The deputy froze. Behind his face shield, he asked the obvious, "Sir, are you sick? Have you been tested?" But the stranger collapsed before answering, his breath shallow, skin burning with fever. It was January 14th, 2021, deep in the pandemic winter. Wyoming was under partial lockdown. Streets were empty, hospitals full. Everyone feared infection. But no one expected what this man carried back. At Laramie County Health, staff treated him as a COVID suspect. They logged him as male, unknown, approximately 40, possible exposure, blood samples, temperature, isolation. When he woke, he spoke quietly through his oxygen mask. "My name is Garrett Sloan. I think I've been gone 6 years." The nurse thought she misheard him. 6 years? Dr. Patel checked the database. Garrett Sloan declared missing November 2015. Last seen leaving Eagles Rest with his younger brother, Lucas, on a hunting trip. The report was still archived. A cold file no one had touched since 2016. 2 brothers. 1 silver truck. Both vanished near Ashwood National Preserve. No signs of struggle, no human remains. And now one of them had walked back during a pandemic, barefoot in the snow. Because of infection protocol, the police couldn't question him in person. They watched through a glass window while he sat under quarantine. His skin was covered in small scars, like someone had traced lines down his neck with a razor. "Those aren't recent," the doctor said. "They've healed years ago." But when the nurse tried to clean them, Garrett flinched hard. "Don't touch the marks," he whispered. "They're listening." That line made everyone stop. One officer crossed himself under his mask. Another said quietly, "Maybe he's just delusional from exposure." Except, the medical report didn't fit delusion. No frostbite, no malnutrition severe enough for 6 years in the wild. His blood work showed strange inflammation markers, but no viral load. It was like his body had adapted or changed. Outside, the world was drowning in statistics. Hospital beds, death counts, new variants, travel bans. Inside that hospital room, one story cut through the noise. A man who claimed he'd been gone for 6 years. In the woods. A journalist from KCY News tried to ask through a video call, "Mr. Sloan, how did you survive out there?" Garrett stared into the camera, silent for a full 10 seconds. Then he said, "You don't survive. You serve." The feed glitched right after, cutting to static. The next day, Sheriff Dana Holt reopened the Sloan case. Limited staff, remote work, all done through encrypted calls, COVID protocol again. They began with Garrett's last text to his wife, sent November 8th, 2015. "Hit the trail. Back by Friday." He never returned. Search teams then found his Chevy Silverado. Locked keys on the seat. Wallets inside. Rifles untouched. The same details still haunted Sheriff Holt. 6 years later, now she stood outside a hospital ward, watching a man who looked both alive and wrong. "Mr. Sloan." She spoke through the intercom. "Do you remember what happened in those woods?" He nodded slowly. "We made camp. The first night was quiet. I remember the creek, the cold air." Then his voice trembled. "And the light." "What light?" "A beam. White. Silent. Cut through the tent like glass." He paused, eyes unfocused, lost somewhere else. "I thought it was a ranger. I called out to my brother. Then something hit my head. Hard." His breathing quickened. "When I woke up, they were already watching." The sheriff exchanged a look with Dr. Patel. "Who was watching?" He didn't answer, just lifted his hand to the scars on his neck. "They taught us pain was purity," he said softly. "They said the fire cleanses what the world infected." By week's end, his quarantine ended. He tested negative for COVID and everything else. The CDC flagged his blood samples as anomalous metabolic adaptation. The sheriff moved him into an isolated interview room. 1 camera, 1 microphone, 1 chair. It was February 1st, 2021. The room smelled of sanitizer and metal. Garrett sat still, wrists cuffed loosely. He didn't look at the camera, only the window behind it. When he finally spoke, the words came slow. "You think the pandemic started here," he said. "You're wrong. The sickness was already waiting in the dirt. He smiled faintly. You just gave it the right world to grow in. Investigators cross-referenced old field reports. Back in 2015, a volunteer searcher mentioned finding a circle of stones, ash piled in the middle, arranged too perfectly to be natural. Now, looking at Garrett's scars, the pattern matched. Tiny symmetrical cuts, circular, like a ritual symbol pressed into flesh. A young agent murmured. You think this is connected? The sheriff replied. If it's not, I don't want to know what is. Days turned to nights. Garrett rarely slept. When he did, nurses heard him whispering. Same phrase, over and over. What is given must be broken. What is broken must be burned. They wrote it down for psychiatric review, but none of them recognized the words. Except one janitor, who'd grown up near Ashwood. He told the sheriff. Old folks used to talk about the Ember Fold, a group that lived off-grid. Said they believed fire was a cure. The sheriff froze. The name had appeared once in a 1,980 seconds missing persons file. 3 hikers, gone without a trace. Same forest. Local legends said they'd been taken by the fold. Meanwhile, the video of Garrett's arrival leaked online. People watched a barefoot man collapsing in the snow, while the comments section argued whether it was a COVID fever dream or something darker. Within a week, the clip hit 2 million views. Conspiracy forums called him the Ashwood Prophet. Some said he'd found God in the forest. Others claimed he'd brought something back. Inside the station, Garrett drew circles on the table with his fingertip. He whispered to himself. They said civilization was diseased. They said the old world had already burned. When the sheriff asked, "Who's they?" he looked up, eyes glassy. The shepherd and his flock. And your brother? Garrett smiled a quiet, broken smile. He believed he could escape, but the fire doesn't let go. That night, Sheriff Holt replayed the footage from his quarantine room. Frame by frame, something caught her eye, the faint reflection of his neck in the glass. The scars. They weren't random lines. They formed a perfect circle, intersected by 4 slashes. A symbol burned into him. She leaned closer to the monitor, and for just 1 second, in the reflection, it looked like the scar pattern was glowing faintly red. Then the lights in the station flickered, and Garrett, on the camera feed, lifted his head, straight into the lens. You kept the fire alive, he said. Now it's coming back. The screen went black. The recording light glowed red. Inside the interrogation room, Garrett Sloan sat across from 2 agents, their masks fogged from breath, gloves squeaking against plastic folders. It was still early 2021. The world outside the glass was quiet, muffled by lockdown and snow. Agent Reeves clicked the recorder. Mr. Sloan, he said, tell us what happened the night you disappeared. Garrett's eyes didn't move. Do you really want to know? The agent nodded. Garrett exhaled slowly. Then don't stop recording. He said it began like every other hunting trip. November 2015. Cold. Clear. The kind of air that bit through flannel. He and his brother, Lucas, left Eagle's Rest before sunrise. Their truck loaded with rifles, rations, and coffee in thermos mugs. Garrett remembered the radio playing low static. A brief headline about an outbreak overseas, a disease no one could pronounce. He'd turned it off and joked, at least the forest's still safe. They reached the Ashwood Preserve by afternoon. 7 hours of winding roads and pine tunnels. Set camp by the creek, the same spot their father once called the Ridge. By nightfall, the fire crackled, soup simmered. The brothers laughed about work and women and old mistakes. It was peaceful right until the light came. A flash, Garrett said. White, no sound. Just still. He thought lightning had struck, but there was no thunder. The light cut through the tent fabric, clean as a blade. He heard footsteps. Lucas? He whispered. Then something slammed into his skull. He woke to the smell of dirt and iron. His hands were tied. The air was cold, damp, heavy. When his eyes adjusted, he realized he was underground. The pit was 6 feet deep, walls of packed mud, floor slick with moss. 2 other people were already there, one older man muttering under his breath, the other barely 20, rocking silently in the corner. The older man turned to him, eyes wild. They come at dawn, he whispered. Don't look at their faces. Before Garrett could respond, footsteps crunched above. Shapes leaned over the edge, faces hidden behind masks made from animal hides, antlers and bones stitched with wire. One voice, deep and deliberate, spoke. Welcome to the fold. They threw ropes down and hauled the captives up one by one. Garrett's wrists burned. His vision swam. When he reached the surface, torches burned in a ring, 20, maybe more, surrounding a crude altar of stone. A man stood at the center. Gray hair, eyes like cold steel, coat patched from military canvas. He held a staff tipped with metal, faintly glowing in the firelight. "I am Shepherd Thorn," he said. "And you are chosen." Garrett blinked. "Chosen for what?" "To be cleansed," Thorn replied. "To burn away the sickness the world carries." They called themselves the Ember Fold, a name passed in whispers, a belief built on one rule: pain is the cure, fire is the vaccine. Every morning, Garrett said, began with the same chant: "What is given must be broken. What is broken must be burned." Has blamed, dozens of voices echoing across the valley. Haunting, rhythmic, almost musical. Meals were scarce roots, stream water, sometimes raw meat. At night, they were ordered to kneel in freezing creeks until their lips turned blue. If someone fainted, they'd say, "The body resists, the soul must not." Thorn preached about purification. He said civilization had fallen long before any virus. That disease wasn't a plague, it was humanity itself. Garrett remembered his sermons word for word. "The world is sick with comfort. You will be its cure." He'd raise his staff high, metal glinting like lightning. The flock would scream, "Burn us clean!" Then they'd press their palms into hot ash until blisters formed. The smell of skin and smoke mixed in the air. Lucas couldn't take it. He tried to reason with them. Garrett said we weren't part of their madness. Thorn only smiled. The unfaithful always speak first. That night, they tied Lucas to a tree. The flock circled, each carrying a stone. One by one, they threw until his body fell silent. "The forest rejects the faithless," Thorn said. He placed a hand on Garrett's shoulder. "Through his fire, you are reborn." Garrett couldn't scream. He couldn't even cry. Weeks blurred into months. They carved symbols into his skin, small, clean cuts down the neck, across the arms, each cut followed by salt water and ash. When Garrett asked what they meant, Thorn said, "They are maps, so the flame can find its way back." And when Garrett closed his eyes, he swore he could feel heat pulsing under them. He learned quickly to obey, to lower his head, to whisper the chant, to become invisible among the flock. There was one moment of kindness, a woman named Mara. She left half a loaf of bread by his side one night. Her voice was soft, barely a breath. "He wasn't always this way. Thorn used to be a medic," Garrett whispered. "How long have you been here?" She smiled, eyes distant. "Long enough to stop counting." As winter came, the rituals grew darker. They built effigies from branches and bone. Each one burned while they chanted Thorn's new prophecy: "The second fire is coming." Garrett started noticing patterns. Every seventh night, they vanished into the woods and returned before dawn. Hands blackened, carrying nothing but silence. He once asked where they went. Thorn replied, "To feed the forest." Garrett never asked again. One morning, the younger captive, the quiet boy, tried to escape. He made it 5 steps past the pit before they caught him. Thorn didn't punish him with fire. He used water. They held him under the creek until the bubbles stopped, Garrett whispered. When they dragged him out, they said the world had finally washed off. The next day, his clothes were folded neatly beside the altar. Garrett began to plan. He memorized their routines, counted footsteps, tracked shifts in the watch. Every night, he whispered to Lucas even though Lucas was gone. He told himself that surviving wasn't betrayal. That escape meant carrying proof the world needed to see. But deep down, he feared something else, that the longer he stayed, the more the words started making sense. Pain cleanses, fire protects. They echoed in his dreams, soft and steady, like prayer. Sometimes he woke shivering, realizing he'd been whispering them aloud. Then came the storm. Late January, snow thick, wind screaming through the pines. The flock went out hunting, spears in hand, chasing a wild boar through the valley. In the chaos, Garrett ran. No plan, no direction, only the thought. Keep moving. Branches tore his skin. Frost bit through his clothes. Lungs burning. He didn't stop for days. He drank melted snow, ate bark, followed the stars west. Behind him, sometimes, he heard faint chanting carried by the wind. What is given must be broken. The agents in the room stayed silent. Garrett's voice had dropped to a whisper. He stared past them, like the memory still played behind the walls. Agent Reeves leaned forward. "And your brother?" Lucas, you're sure he's gone? Garrett nodded slowly. He died that night. Then after a pause he added, but the fire. It doesn't let anyone stay dead for long. A long silence filled the room. Somewhere in the hallway, an intercom announced a new pandemic update. Travel restrictions extended through March. Agent Reeves turned off the recorder. But before he stood, Garrett said one last thing. They said the world would burn first through disease. And when fear spread faster than the sickness, that's when the fold would rise again. He looked up calm now. Maybe you called it a pandemic. They called it the cleansing. Outside, the snow fell heavier. Somewhere deep in Ashwood, firelight flickered through the trees, faint, rhythmic, almost breathing. No one saw it that night. But weeks later, when investigators reached the site he described, they would find the circle of stone still warm beneath the ice, and carved into the rock in perfect lines. Pain is the cure, fire is the vaccine. The blizzard had broken by dawn. Garrett Sloan stumbled out of the forest like a shadow losing its shape. His breath came in shallow bursts, half air, half smoke. He had run until his feet split, until his voice gave out screaming for a brother who could no longer answer. When he finally collapsed beside a dirt road, snow swallowed the sound of his fall. For 3 days, he drifted in and out of fever. He ate bark, sucked water from melted ice. He remembered only the wind and the sound of chanting that followed him even in sleep. When the logging truck found him, the driver thought he was dead. A man with burns on his neck, eyes wide open but unfocused. Garrett didn't resist when they lifted him into the truck bed. He just whispered, "Don't go back there." Back in 2021, that whisper became the center of an entire investigation. The FBI called it Operation Ashlight. Pandemic protocols slowed everything, smaller teams, no helicopters, limited contact. Agents worked through masks and satellite feeds. Thermal drones scanned the Ashwood Preserve, picking up traces of heat under snow. At first, they thought it was geothermal activity. Then the readings moved. The sheriff's convoy reached the valley after 2 weeks of prep. 27 officers, 2 forensic trucks, 1 local guide. Garrett rode in the back of a Forest Service SUV, wrapped in a gray blanket, silent. Every time the road narrowed, he whispered, "Turn back." Agent Reeves asked, "Are you afraid they'll find you?" Garrett said, "No, I'm afraid they'll recognize me." The deeper they drove, the darker it became. Pines closed in. GPS signals glitched. Radio chatter turned to static. When they stopped, the forest felt alive, breathing, watching. Garrett stepped out first. His eyes darted between trees like someone expecting to see faces there. "The air feels thicker here," he murmured. "You can smell the ash under the snow." Two K9 units led the way. Within an hour, the dogs stopped at a clearing surrounded by black rock. A perfect circle of stones lay beneath the frost, each one scorched. Inside, they found ashes, animal bones, bits of metal, and 1 small tooth. Human. The next discovery came 2 miles north. A collapsed pit, half filled with snow and leaves. Chains buried in the mud. Garrett stared down at it, expression blank. "This was the pit," he said. "This is where they broke us." He knelt, brushing snow from the dirt, until a piece of rusted tin appeared etched with 1 word. Ash. Agent Reeves radioed the find. Then, in the corner of his camera frame, something flickered, a reflection, like firelight. But the air was still. Forensics teams collected everything. Blood samples, fabric scraps, bone fragments. The results would later confirm what everyone feared: the remains matched Lucas Sloan. Blunt trauma. Multiple impacts. The report called it ritualized stoning. Garrett didn't look at the photographs. He just said, "He's free now." But one note from the coroner stood out. Traces of soot inside the skull cavity, as if fire had burned from within. When the press got wind of it, the story exploded. The Ashwood cult. Survivor returns during pandemic. News vans camped outside the sheriff's office, reporters shouting behind masks. Garrett refused every interview. He stayed in a guarded cabin under FBI supervision. At night, agents heard him pacing, sometimes humming a low rhythmic tune. Agent Reeves started calling it the Ashwood Prayer. He logged every phrase Garrett repeated in his sleep. They were the same words carved into stones near the pit. What is given must be broken. What is broken must be burned. 2 months later, they caught the first survivor, a man named Tom Reeves, found stealing food from a gas station outside Missoula. He wore a necklace made of bone fragments and called himself Reborn. When interrogated, Reeves laughed. "The shepherd isn't dead," he said. "He just changed his face. He refused food, drank only water, and died of heart failure 3 days later." The second arrest came from a tip: a woman cleaning rooms at a roadside motel in Kalispell. Her name tag read Mara H. When agents entered, she didn't scream. She simply said, "You finally followed the smoke." During questioning, Mara never blinked. She described the fold as a vaccine for the soul. When Agent Reeves asked about Owen Thorne, she smiled. "You think killing him ends it? He was just the messenger." "Messenger for who?" Her gaze shifted toward the one-way mirror. "For the fire. It chooses who speaks next." Then she leaned forward, whispering, "He carries it now. The one you keep locked in that cabin. Garrett Sloan." The room went cold. Reeves replayed her statement 3 times. Garrett had been under watch for weeks. No contact, no electronics, no visitors. Still, strange things kept happening. Cameras flickered at night. Audio logs caught whispers even when he slept. One clip recorded his voice saying, "I see you, Shepherd." When confronted, Garrett denied it. "I don't remember speaking," he said softly. Sometimes the words just come. His neck scars had darkened again, the edges raw, like something beneath the skin was pushing out. In April, investigators located Thorne himself. A ranger near Cobalt Mine spotted smoke rising from an abandoned shaft. The tactical unit moved in at dawn. Thorne resisted, charging with a makeshift spear. One shot ended it. He fell, muttering the chant until the last breath left his body. The staff he carried, carved from wood and metal, was covered in etchings, matching Garrett's scars. Inside the mine, they found journals, pages of cramped handwriting, diagrams, maps, prayers. One line appeared dozens of times. "Ash carries the mark. He will return when the world is ready." The FBI laid the journals before Garrett in the interview room. He refused to touch them. His eyes locked on the page showing a circle of stones, the words written in ash. "The second shepherd." Reeves asked quietly, "Do you know what that means?" Garrett didn't answer. He traced his fingers over his scars, then looked at the mirror. "You think you killed it," he said. "But the fire never dies. It just finds another mouth to breathe through." Things and canker. His reflection flickered in the glass for a split second. The glow from his neck pulsed faintly red. By May, the public called him a miracle survivor. Talk shows debated whether he was a victim or a vessel. Conspiracy channels labeled him patient zero of the soul. The FBI wanted to close the case, but Agent Reeves couldn't shake a feeling every time Garrett spoke. The words seemed rehearsed, like he was remembering someone else's sermon. In one late-night report, Reeves wrote, "He doesn't recount trauma, he preaches it." That same week, hospital staff reported a cluster of fires near old search zones, campfires burning in perfect circles. Inside each, they found animal bones and pieces of metal engraved with new symbols. One drone camera captured movement: a tall figure standing among the flames, wearing a hood, head tilted toward the sky. When agents returned, nothing remained but warm ash. Garrett watched the footage in silence. After a long pause, he whispered, "It's not them you should fear, it's what they left behind." He was released from federal custody 3 months later. On paper, the case was closed. Official cause of disappearance: unlawful detainment by extremist group. But the final medical file told a different story. Tissue analysis around his neck scars showed traces of metal, the same alloy found in Thorne's staff. No explanation, no infection, just residue. The last scene from that phase of the investigation came from a night vision camera outside the cabin, 2:47 a.m. Garrett standing on the porch, head tilted back, whispering into the dark. The microphone caught 6 words before the feed cut out. "The shepherd still walks in fire." A wind gust blew through. The porch light blinked once, then went out, and in the morning, the deputies swore they smelled smoke. 3 years had passed since Operation Ashlight closed. The pandemic had waned, masks disappeared, and the world tried to forget. But in Raven Creek, Colorado, a single man still lived as if isolation never ended. Garrett Sloan's cabin stood alone in the valley. No internet, no visitors, no power grid. Locals called him the quiet farmer. He kept to himself, tending horses and chopping wood long after sunset. He never lit a fire. Neighbors said he'd rather freeze than see flame. But sometimes, when fog rolled over the valley, a faint orange glow leaked through his barn walls. Slow, pulsing, like something breathing. Sheriff Holt had retired by then. But every few months, she'd reread the old file, the pit, the chants, the marks on his neck. She always stopped at one photo, the circle of stones still warm beneath the snow. In early 2022, a journalist reached out to her. Her name was Clara Jensen, investigative author for the Horizon Review. She'd been writing a book about the Ashwood case, the Flame Doctrine. Clara said she'd found something new in the FBI archives. A sketch from Owen Thorne's final journal, the drawing of a man with scars down his neck. Underneath, a title, The Second Shepherd. Clara drove to Raven Creek that March. The air was still heavy with the smell of burnt pine from last year's wildfires. She stopped her rental car at the gate of Garrett's ranch. A hand-painted sign read, "No visitors, no fire." When he opened the door, he looked older, thinner, eyes sunken. His beard was gray now, his expression calm but distant. Clara introduced herself, said she wasn't there to sensationalize, only to understand. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he stepped aside and said quietly, "If you came for answers, leave your matches outside." Inside, the cabin was bare. Walls stripped, furniture minimal. A cross of metal wire hung above the window. Clara noticed a faint burn mark on the floor, circular, blackened, almost hidden under dust. She set down her recorder. "Mr. Sloan, the last file mentions something called the Second Shepherd. Do you know what that means?" Garrett poured coffee but didn't drink. His hands trembled slightly as he said, "It means he always comes back. Not as a man, but as belief." Clara leaned forward. "Do you think Thorne meant you?" Garrett didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the empty fireplace. He spoke softly, like confessing to something he hadn't decided was a sin. "Thorne used to say fire was memory, that it keeps what we burn." He looked at his hands. "Sometimes I still smell the smoke, even when there's no fire." Clara showed him the drawing. He froze. "That's not me," he said. "It can't be." But the lines of the sketch, the scars, the jawline, the shape of his eyes, matched perfectly. Clara turned on her recorder. Garrett whispered, "He said the world needed a new shepherd after the cleansing. He said the flame would choose." They spoke for hours. About Ashwood, about the chance, about the people who still believed. Clara mentioned an online group called The Fold Reborn. She said its members claimed the fire symbol was appearing again, drawn in dirt, in ash, in frost on windows. Garrett looked up sharply. "Where?" "Montana, near the old preserve." He stood abruptly, the chair scraping the floor. Then it started again. "Same direction." Clara flinched. "You mean, I mean the fire's hungry," he said. "It always comes back when people start to forget." That night, Clara stayed in a motel nearby. She reviewed her recordings, rewound a few clips and froze. Between her questions, faint whispers overlapped her voice. They weren't echoes. They were words. "What is given must be broken. What is broken must be burned." She played it again. Same pattern. Then the power flickered, and her phone lit up by itself, one new text from an unknown number. It said, "You shouldn't have shown him the page." 2 weeks later, Clara Jensen went missing. Her rental car was found on a dirt road north of Raven Creek. Door open, keys still in ignition. Inside lay her notebook, half burned. The last line read, "He doesn't remember what he's become." FBI searched the area. No tracks, no footprints, just a circle of ash pressed into the ground. At the center, a single feather, charred black. When deputies reached Garrett's ranch, they found it empty. His horses were gone, barn doors open, the house cold. On the kitchen table sat his wedding ring, blackened and warped. In the barn, investigators discovered a burned patch in the dirt. Infrared scans showed residual heat, as if the fire had gone out only hours before. No accelerant, no matchsticks. Carved into the wooden beam above it were 5 words. "The shepherd still watches." The case reopened briefly under federal review, but post-pandemic funding was gone. Resources stretched thin. Within months, it was quietly shelved again. Yet strange reports began surfacing across the state. Hikers missing near the Ashwood Ridge, campfires burning in perfect circles. Even in the rain, a ranger near Cobalt Mine claimed he saw a tall man standing in the firelight, scars glowing faintly red around his neck. When he called out, the figure smiled and vanished into smoke. By autumn, Clara's book was posthumously released. The Flame Doctrine climbed bestseller lists, fueled by speculation and fear. Documentaries, podcasts, late-night talk shows, everyone wanted to know what really happened to Garrett Sloan. Online forums resurrected the Fold's mantra, Some called it a spiritual vaccine, a ritual for cleansing after years of plague. The chant spread through videos, audio loops, anonymous accounts. Each upload had the same background noise crackling, like burning wood, and buried deep in the waveform, a faint male voice repeating, "Pain is the cure, fire is the vaccine." Winter came again. Snow blanketed the valley, silencing everything but the wind. A mail carrier found Garrett's truck abandoned near the Wind River Trail. Inside, canned food, a hunting knife, and a single page torn from a journal. Written in charcoal, it said, "He spoke through me. I understand now." A mile from the truck, hikers later found a clearing. Ashes, small animal bones, and a mask half burned, half white, stitched with wire. No human remains, only the faint smell of smoke, still fresh. Authorities called it a disappearance. The media called it the last flame. But locals whispered a different name, the second shepherd. They said he walks the ridges when the snow melts. Tall, scarred, silent, carrying a staff capped with metal. They said he watches the woods, waiting for someone to light the first spark. Some nights, campers swear they hear a voice in the wind, not shouting, whispering, a rhythm, steady and low. What is given must be broken. What is broken must be burned. Years later, new hikers enter the Ashwood Preserve. They find circles of stones, still perfectly arranged. No footprints lead to them, yet the ashes are always warm. Some say it's just heat from the ground. Others claim it's something older, something that survived both plague and time. A faith without walls, a sickness without cure. As night falls, the forest hums. It sounds like wind at first, then like voices. And if you stand there long enough, you can almost smell it. Smoke, sweet, metallic, alive. The fire beneath Ashwood never died. It just waited for someone to breathe again.